The subject today is living soil. Some of us have dirt, some of us have soil, and some of us have living soil, and there is a distinct difference. Living soil is a regenerative soil, meaning that as time goes by, it actually increases in fertility and gets better and better, as opposed to a normal bag soil, even the most expensive ones, that deplete very soon after we're using them, within a season or 2 seasons. So we're going to talk about the different components necessary to create a living soil, and then we'll talk about how to maintain that soil over time. So to begin with, we start off with a base soil. And I usually just find the least expensive base soil that I can find, because we're going to build this soil into a living soil with a number of different components. We're going to create a real living soil that will regenerate over time. The first and key component in living soil is biochar. Biochar is charcoal suitable for soil. It manages the soil by holding on to water up to 7 times its weight. And in the root zone, this water that is held by the biochar is like a little reservoir where the plants can access it as they need it. So it does drought tolerate, as well as do other things such as holding our nutrients. So when we establish biochar in our soil column, the nutrients that absorb into the biochar stay within that soil column. So when we're using biochar with proper protocol in our soil, we reduce the runoff of nutrients by up to 80%. This is a very important part, because we're not going to lose our nutrients, nor do we have to keep adding too many nutrients as time goes by. My favorite part of it is that the microscopic view of this charcoal, this carbon, this biochar, has nooks and crannies and crevices and holes, and these are luxury condominiums from microbiology in the soil. As they move into the structure, they expand their colonies and proliferate, and we build our biology, because biology is key to living soil. So biochar being the key component, biochar is a fixed carbon, meaning that it does not deteriorate, does not break down. And biochar is not a fertilizer. It is strictly a structure to hold our water, nutrients, and microbiology. And the average life of biochar is many, many centuries. We know that it goes a few thousand years because the Amazonian Indians who used it in the rainforest 2,000 to 3,000 years ago is still there, still active, and still working. So it's a permanent amendment, more of a capital investment into your soil than a yearly expenditure, as you normally do with fertilizers and other inputs. So after we get our biochar mixed in with our soil, now we're going to add the organic inputs. And there are few of them. The main one is compost. We make our own compost here. We use over 30 ingredients. We have an aerated system. It's a pretty sophisticated compost, but any compost that you're going to make at home is really good to use and will work. Composting on your property is the lifeblood of your garden. Compost adds nutrients, it adds biology, and compost becomes your next generation of soil. So composting is essential. I recommend everyone do it. We not only can take care of all the waste products from our kitchen and our yard waste and other inputs, but composting is a wonderful thing. And we'll do a session on composting at another time. But compost, another key ingredient. The next ingredient that I use in my living soil is worm castings. Now these particular worm castings we use are exceptional. They're very high biology. They're more of a custom gourmet type of worm casting as opposed to just a typical brand on the store shelves. So this has high biology, both bacterial and fungal, and many other inputs into it. So worm castings and compost are the 2 organic inputs, the food, the energy, the biology, the nutrients that we're going to add to our living soil. Once we get those first components in, then we need to talk about mineralization, mineralizing our soil. All life on Earth, all cellular structure life on Earth is created through mineralization, having the proper minerals in there. Billions of years ago, the first organisms on Earth, deep in the ocean, the simplest organisms formed by minerals. These deep sea vents on the bottom of the ocean pumped up tremendous amounts of minerals. And way down there, there was no photosynthesis, no light. And there is a tremendous amount of life down there. So mineralization is very important. And there's a number of different ones you can use. There's azomite, there's granite, there's basalt, there's St. George's black, there's leonardite, which creates your humates and fulvics, there's kelp meal, there's blood meal, there's crab shell and chitin things, and boron, and a series of other things. Some people will use one, maybe two, maybe three of them. What we have done is we've blended 10 different kinds of mineral complexes together to give us a wide array of minerals and trace minerals, over 400 in the blend that we created, Blue Sky Biochar. So we're putting in there biochar powder, we're putting azomite, we're putting granite, we're putting basalt, we're putting the St. George's black, we're putting the humate mix of leonardite, we're putting in kelp meal, we're putting in crab shell, we're putting in boron, and we're putting in C90, which is a sea mineral mix. So we blend all these together in a specific proportion, and once you add your minerals to your soil mix or as a top application, they last anywhere from 3 to 10 years. So it's a very slow release. It's not something you have to do yearly. You do it once, do it properly, and you can forget it for quite a few years. So mineralization is the next step in creating this living soil. Now, once we have got those things blended in, now we've got to look at the biology itself. There's a balance between bacterial and fungal in our soil, and we must maintain this. So let's talk about bacterial for a moment and keep it simple. There are many species of bacterial qualities to the soil. But let's just look at it as two things, good bacteria and bad bacteria. And it's very easy to tell which one you have, because when you have smelly soil that smells rancid, you've got bad bacteria. If the soil smells good and rich and earthy, you've got good bacteria. So we'll keep it very simple in that respect. Bacterial or bacteria is very hardy stuff. It can practically survive an ice age and still survive in the soil. But when we talk about our fungal quality, the other part of the balance, that's a very delicate thing. The mycorrhizae fungal in the soil is very delicate. If you pull the soil out of the ground and hold it up to air and light, they start dying right away. So we need to build our fungal qualities and then protect those fungal qualities in the soil so that they continue to flourish and give us that balance between bacterial and fungal. To build our fungal qualities, we're going to use mycorrhizae, which are these little spores. A teaspoon will have millions and millions, practically billions of spores in them. They're very teeny, and they basically have many different species of endos and ectos, but we're not going to get into that technical part of it. Just discuss the fact that we need to add mycorrhizae to our soil to build up our fungal qualities. So we're going to use this particular one here. We work with a company called Bigfoot, and they make 3 different kinds of mycorrhizae. This is a direct-to-soil granular mycorrhizae. So we'll actually mix this in the soil or put it into the hole when we put a little plant in the pot into the ground. And you don't need a whole lot of this because, like I said, this particular bowl right here has billions and billions of spores in it of various different species. Plus there's other very good things in here. There's biochar, there's kelp extract, there's worm casting extract. This is an exceptional mycorrhizae product. So we also have mycorrhizae in a powdered or concentrate or soluble form, which we'll talk about in a few moments as far as mixing with liquids to do drenching onto the soil. So you can apply your mycorrhizae in different ways. I actually do all of the ways to do it. I use it as a direct granular into the soil, and then later, after I've built the living soil, I'll do a drench with a couple of other things, and we'll talk about that in a moment. So we've got our base soil, we've got our biochar, our compost, our worm castings, our rock dust, our mycorrhizae, and then in order to protect that soil, the topper is mulch. Mulching is critical. Mulching protects the soil from the UV rays of the sun. If you've got bare soil, when the sun hits it, it's killing biology, and the longer it's exposed, the further down it goes and kills the biology in your soil. And you end up with eventually almost dirt. So we're using here, and we're showing here, this is a shredded mulch, many kinds of mulch. You can use grass clippings, leaves, chunky mulch. There's so many different things that mulch can be, pine needles, so many different things that mulch is. In nature, when the leaves fall from a tree, nature says, don't you dare move them. Not only is it a mulch, but it breaks down and creates the cycle of feeding that tree over time. So mulching is great because it protects the moisture in the soil, so it has less evaporation. It protects the soil from the sun's UV rays, from beating up and killing the microbiology in the soil. Some people say, oh, it's great, it can pull the weeds out. Well, that's okay, but that's not why I like it so much. But one of the things about mulch, and why I like a shredded mulch, is as this mulch deteriorates, it breaks down and feeds the mycorrhizae fungal and helps to build as well as protect our mycorrhizae fungal in the soil. So if you've ever been in a forest, an old forest, and you've seen this giant pile of leaves there, and you move the leaves away and you expose the top of the soil, what do you see? You see white stringy stuff. That's the mycorrhizae fungal. That's the good stuff that we want to build and create and substantiate and have expand over time. Now, mycorrhizae fungal is a very interesting thing because it's kind of like the internet under the ground. Trees and plants communicate with each other through this network of mycorrhizae fungal. Trees miles away can even sense other plants and trees and what their needs are. Plants and trees, like for instance in a properly constructed food forest, support each other. We have learned about the different components that we use to create our living soil. Whatever method you use to blend them together, whether it's a cement mixer or a tarp pulling it all around, or just putting it on the ground and blending it in, or doing lasagna layering a little bit at a time and then stirring it in the raised beds or in the area you're growing, that's up to you. Just try to get it blended as much as you can. So to maintain this living soil over periods of time, and I do it frequently, we're going to add compost, worm castings, and other inputs. I generally also do a drenching occasionally, and I use a product called Ambrosia, which is a liquid worm casting. You use 4 ounces of it per gallon of water, along with 4 ounces of a horticultural molasses, and 1 teaspoon of the soluble concentrate mycorrhizae. Mix that up and drench it around the drip zone, a little further away from the plant to encourage the roots to move out, because plants, trees, and the root systems will look for nutrients, look for value in food and water, and encourage them to grow out a bit. Create living soil, enjoy the fruits of your labor. What you'll find is not only in your own garden will you get self-sufficiency in your food source, but you're going to get nutrient-dense foods that you cannot buy in a store. The organic products that we buy in stores are better than the conventional growing products, but when you grow it in your own garden, you have that sustainability, you have that self-sufficiency, your own food source, and nutrient-dense foods. So, leave your carbon footprint in the garden. I'm Michael Whitman from Blue Sky Biochar. It really doesn't matter how pretty your garden is. If you don't have that soil, you're not there. So living soil is what we're all looking for. And when we talk about living soil, some people will say, well, I always thought I had that. I always thought I was doing that. Well, these are the components now you know of what we need to do to make that happen.